I guess one of the reasons I love horror is because I grew up watching Scooby Doo, and that was the maximum exposure to horror I got. See, I was 10 and not allowed on family movie nights where they watched The Exorcist or Rosemary's Baby. So, the Scooby Doo Where Are You reruns and its monsters became my kind of horror nights. I did figure out after a couple of episodes that most of the monsters would turn out to be villains under hideous masks, but damn, did they look scary. At least enough for Scooby, Shaggy, and me to curl up. I know that the animation developed and we got better designed creatures or ghosts in the later versions, but the ones in this show, like the Creeper or Ape Man, they felt different, dude. Probably I am high on nostalgia, but if you're a millennial, you probably understand where I'm coming from. So how about we take a trip down the memory lane and revisit every monster that made Scooby Doo Where Are You so much fun? Black Knight. Oh boy, I remember every scene of this episode. You know, the moment when the armored knight opened the crate and peeked from the back of the truck and then drove it himself. What the hell, dude? Then came the moment the helmet fell off and there was no head. Of course, Mystery Inc. had to solve the case and got involved. Regarded as the Black Knight, this moving armor freaked the F out of me. On the surface, it was a traditional English suit of black armor and had a red plume on its helmet. But the visor was the creepiest part. It showed a pair of glowing yellow eyes. Shaggy and his friends delivered the apparently harmless armor to the museum it was supposed to reach and delivered it to Mr. Wickles. However, he seemed worried about the disappearance of Professor Hyde White, who was in charge of the medieval armor. So we now have a person suspiciously missing, and Wickles telling the story about how the armor comes to life on a full moon, and that goddamn eyes had to glow right then. Of course, it was a full moon, and the Black Knight actually started pursuing the Mystery Inc. members. The way Scooby ran and crashed into Velma, knocking her glasses off? Hilarious! But the Black Knight was pretty strong. He appeared as an animated armor, which should have ideally made his movement restricted, but he exhibited enough strength and agility to pick up and throw a table at the wall. And that gave him an even more sinister vibe. Ultimately, when they unmasked the armor, it turned out that Mr. Wickles was hiding under it and creating the illusion of a haunted metal armor. He was connected to a smuggling gang and was the one responsible for kidnapping the professor. Phantom. If there's one thing I learned from this episode, it's to take warning signs seriously. Whether it's the universe or a supposed ghost giving you signals to leave, you leave. The hassle in the castle had the Mystery Inc. gang ganging up on a haunted isle and finding an abandoned Vasquez castle. Now, even before they reached the place, we already saw the white sheet floating ghost. When Fred read the danger note and still decided to go into the pirate castle to find the truth, I felt Scooby's expression. Soon they started hearing creepy laughter and Daphne fell down through a trap door. The Phantom could even walk through solid walls, and it seemed like the gang encountered a real ghost this time. And his appearance absolutely justified the name. A translucent white sheet with dark eye holes literally moving through air. But soon it became clear that whatever this thing was, he was in no mood to let the Mystery Inc. members stay in the castle. But why? Well, it turned out that the Phantom was a former magician, known as Bluestone the Great, who had come to the castle in search of the legendary Vasquez treasure. That explained how he could appear as a real spectral entity. The man was using his magic tricks, and the group ultimately found commonly used tools in magic acts like disappearing cabinets, levitation tables, and a saw-him-in-two box. He also used a projector and mirror to create an intangible image of himself. Not sure if Nolan saw this episode, but it seems like a rough draft for The Prestige. Interestingly, the Mystery Inc. would come across similar figures. One would be in the episode titled A Night of Fright is No Delight, where the spectral beings wore green hooded robes, and if Bluestone the Great's Phantom looked like an annoyed Casper, the ones in these episodes looked genuinely menacing with orange eyes and mouth and long, curved fingernails. They too laughed in a creepy manner and even managed to write on mirrors in a ghostly font. Ghost of Captain Cutler. This one's actually a favorite of mine. The way A Clue for Scooby Doo handled the narrative, unraveling the story layer by layer, and still making it palatable for young audiences. Absolute genius. And of course, the ghost in this episode was a mind-bender. It appeared in an old-fashioned deep-sea diving suit, which was covered in glowing seaweed. But wait, that wasn't the scariest part. The diving suit seemed to have shining eyes under the helmet. Yep, that was creepy, man, trust me. This spectral being, whom we knew as Captain Cutler, often made scary groaning sounds, and when Captain Cutler walked, he left glowing footprints behind him, and it literally looked like some dead sailor had crawled out of the ocean. I remember how they saw the glowing diver slowly disappear back into the sea. Oh boy, I was afraid of the water for quite some days. The gang figured that it was the ghost of a captain who died when his ship collided with a yacht that sank into the ocean. And the legend went that after his death, he began haunting the Rocky Point beach and stealing yachts. When the gang went back underwater, they found a man in a diving suit seated at a table, and soon, the ghost began chasing them through the wrecked yacht. But the truth was, Captain Cutler was very much alive and faked his own death. He and his wife planned to use his legend to steal yachts, bring them underwater, and sell them after repainting. Also, the glowing appearance had a simple explanation. Captain Cutler covered his diving suit with the glowing seaweed found around the graveyard of ships. But the glowing underwater corpse was one of the eeriest creatures I have seen in Scooby Doo, Where Are You? Indian Witch Doctor. Who on earth imagines that they would witness a huge purple headdress made up of black horns and white hair wearing beige Native American clothes moving around in a deserted village? Not even him from the Powerpuff Girls could have prepared me for that. But poor Scooby had to witness it to run for his life and hide in a pot. The monster in this episode was known as the Indian Witch Doctor, and though they should have been really concerned by how the apparently 1,000-year-old man was alive, Velma was somehow just intrigued by his good English. The witch doctor was nowhere near a good host and often spawned out of nowhere and shook his maracas, warning the gang to leave his territory. Boy, was he good at playing peekaboo. The witch doctor even seemed capable of teleporting into a curtain of fire. After being swarmed by bats and Shaggy almost peeing himself in coming across another figure in Native American dress who turned out to be Scooby in disguise, we learned the truth. That fire curtain through which the monster vanished? They were secret passages. And the spooky Indian witch doctor was a man, Buck Masters, whose motives were especially scary for Scooby. He was basically stealing dogs for an upcoming dog show where he wanted his own pet to win. So whichever dog seemed capable of defeating it, he stole them and planned to release them once the competition was won. I mean, think about Scooby. It's like a kidnapper telling abduction stories to a child. Oh, about the ghostly Indian on horseback that Shaggy encountered? It was actually created using a movie projector hidden in the back of a truck. Scooby and company would once again meet a witch doctor in the episode A Tiki Scare Is No Fair, but here he appeared in an orange robe and wore a Hawaiian voodoo mask. What made him appear even more terrifying was the skull on top of his staff. Miner 49er. Once I rewatched the series as an adult, I really appreciated the pun in the title. Known as Miner 49er, the apparent ghost was an old gold miner who had been looking for, rather haunting the mines to find the remaining deposits since 1849, and he made sure to look the part. He sported a huge gray beard and a mustache that looked like a pretty cozy home for lice. All you could see of his face was the nose and the surrounding face because while the bottom half was covered by his beard, he used a big brown cowboy hat. As far as his attire goes, that was pretty simple. A pair of brown pants, a long-sleeved blue shirt, and an open black waistcoat. But the weirdest part about him was height. No, I'm not talking about Jacob Elordi levels of tall, the kind that makes girls swoon. I'm talking about menacing, towering figures like Slender Man. When the Mystery Inc.'s paths crossed with him, he would often chase them with an expressionless face. You could hear him grunting or moaning that echoed through the mine once in a while. And that felt disturbing because it made the entire dark cave appear as alive. The miner also pulled this stunt where he would appear and disappear behind doors, and even chase Scooby and Shaggy through the mine in a rail car. I remember Scooby fighting him in the cart and waving at him. And that gave Shaggy a good idea. The gang figured that something was amiss and this man was not really a ghost though, and they hatched a plan to catch him. By using a rail car and a loudspeaker through which Shaggy provided the train noise and a flashlight, the miner thought that a train was about to hit him, and all his poltergeist games were done. He tried to escape and his boots fell off, exposing the stilts underneath that have hit the unusual height. It was a man named Hank who learned about an exhausted gold mine above an oil well, and thus tried to scare people away and buy the land at cheap rates. The treasure was basically oil in this case. Ape Man. I wanted to give Shaggy's Great Dane a whole bag of Scooby snacks for this one. The dog who jumps onto Shaggy's lap at the first sign of danger went above and beyond to fight a monster. He was terrified, but he did what he had to. And I don't blame him for getting scared. Do you remember what this monster looked like? Holy crap. He looked like a giant rogue ape covered in dark blue fur with sharp teeth. And he had this big snout and red pupils. If I were Scooby, I would just probably pray for candy mint. Okay, let me give a little context here. Basically, the gang has taken up jobs as extras for a movie titled The Ape Man of Forbidden Mountain. It was directed by Daphne's uncle, John, who revealed that the production was being affected because of a story about a real ape man haunting the place. The ape man looked like he was super strong, but curiously enough, he often relied on his wit to scare the gang. For starters, he managed to disguise as Scooby and try to fool the real one with a fake mirror. He even managed to hide in plain sight by posing as a hunting trophy head. Dude, this one gave Mystery Inc. some hard time. He seemed to chase Shaggy on a moving board and crashed onto him only for him to realize that it was a dummy. The ape man even ran after Scooby and Shaggy, and the three went around a pool table on a loop. The most frightening part was when he tried to throw Candy Mint off a narrow bridge, but Scooby got his hero moment. It was finally revealed that the ape man was actually the stuntman, Carl, who was angry for not getting the lead male role in the film. It was a pretty grand reveal because at one point he managed to lock himself inside a trunk to remove any suspicions about him. I mean, he played the part of a creature quite well. I guess Uncle John could have reconsidered casting him. Puppet Master. When I watched this episode recently, the Puppet Master immediately reminded me of Claude Rains' Eric from Phantom of the Opera. And turns out the creature's appearance was inspired by him. He wore a deep gray, high-collared cloak with red inner lining, gray gloves, and a black cavalier hat. To complete his spooky appearance, the Puppet Master wore a mask which gave him a pale grayish skin and the yellow sclera. Honestly, if you see someone like this lurking around in an old theater, you'd probably believe that you were about to become a part of the horror story. But that's exactly what he liked doing, sneaking around quietly and stalking the gang. Now, this man was dangerous. He intentionally cut the rope holding a weighted sandbag, and it crashed down to threaten Velma and Daphne. Then came the part that still gives me the creeps. See, life-size mannequins and puppets give me the ick, and I can't even explain why. I mean, I can look at a mannequin through the window of any closed shop and, I don't know man, it just feels uncomfortable. So whenever I see the Puppet Master living up to his name and using Viking and pirate figures with their swords and yelling their battle cries, it feels like my worst nightmare coming true. But the Mystery Inc. was obviously more courageous than me, and even after discovering that the theater's doorman was a life-size puppet too, they tried to uncover the truth. Though the Puppet Master played the classic vanishing trope on them, the group caught him working the puppets and trapped him. Revealed as Mr. Pietro, he then confessed running a counterfeit operation underneath the theater and thus trying to scare people away. Ghost of Elias Kingston. Yeah, no, the Mystery Inc. needed better friends, because what do you mean they ended up in a haunted mansion? As it so happened, the gang was supposed to catch up with their pal, Sharon Weatherby, but her family was being tormented by the ghost of Elias Kingston. According to the legend, Elias Kingston haunted the abandoned Kingston mansion, who apparently had one goal: to get Weatherby's fortune. However, when Sharon's uncle Stuart refused, the ghost threatened old age hex on them, and he was not bluffing, because Stuart actually aged overnight. Of course, the gang took up their new mission, and the ghost of Elias Kingston was one damn spooky design. He had this blue skin, bowl-styled black hair, and instead of the white part in an eye, his was yellow. He wore an old gray trench coat with matching gray pants and black shoes. Yup, he pretty much seemed like he had stepped straight out of the grave. He would use a ghostly voice to call out from the mansion, which allegedly put people in a trance and lured them inside. When Mystery Inc. followed him inside, he locked them in a crypt. This ghost also had a special ability. He could possess and control a crystal globe and make it fly around. Even his face appeared inside the ball, and the table underneath started moving around on its own. I remember how Scooby kept flying on the tabletop with the crystal ball in hand, but it turned out it was just a propeller under the table. Damn dude, I just realized why moving objects in a horror film don't scare me. There has to be a propeller somewhere. The gang soon discovered the ghost's fingerprints on a doorknob and started questioning his ghost-like abilities. Then they found the professional makeup kit, a closed-circuit TV camera, and even figured that the face inside the crystal was done by using a camera. But wait, there was one trick which really got me. The ghost seemingly vanished into the Kingston family mausoleum in the cemetery. What the? Oh, and the clothes on the skeleton were pretty creepy too. Anyway, it turned out that the ghost of Elias Kingston was Uncle Stewart himself, and he wanted the family treasures all to himself. Charlie. Even before Terminator appeared on screen, Charlie scared the shit out of me, and made me wary of amusement park visits. Sure, the gang uncovered the mystery as usual, but the very thought of finding a tall, metal figure with orange eyes was very disturbing. He has been named as Charlie and had a helmet-shaped head, a purple thorax, and different shades of blue on his body. But the creepiest part was the beige face amidst all this blue and purple. Mystery Inc. had no idea what they were dealing with at first. They were simply waiting for the amusement park Funland to open when suddenly the goddamn theme park came alive. The lights came on and the ride started moving on there. Yeah, it was Charlie's doing, but he was not trying to scare them. He just had the controls of the entire place, starting from the cash registers to the food stalls. But robots were not that common back then, so realizing that this thing is not human yet, he can chase Scooby and Shaggy on the roller coaster, was genuinely scary. And then when they managed to trap him inside a wooden crate, Charlie smashed through a brick wall. Yep, they were not about to unveil a villainous man under a getup anymore, and eventually realized that he was a robot created by Mr. Jenkins to help him run Funland. But why did he operate the park at night? Because his sister Sarah sabotaged the machine and made it go out of control. She didn't think robots should be running a place where children come to have fun. Dude, monster makeup or not, I have watched enough movies and shows after this to realize that rogue robots are probably worse than ghosts. Mummy of Anka. Even today, this is easily one of the most recognizable creatures from Scooby Doo Where Are You? I mean, the mummies look scary in themselves, and imagine one running around. The worst part about the Mummy of Anka was that the gang already knew how dangerous the mummy was. While helping to put together a display on the 3,000-year-old Mummy of Anka, they learned about a curse about this mummy from Dr. Najib. Apparently, Anka had sworn that if anyone ever removed him from his tomb, he would return from the dead and turn the person into stone who dared to do so. Now, I don't know why anyone would hear that story and casually continue working around the mummy, but it's the Mystery Inc., and Shaggy managed to make things worse when he accidentally slipped an ancient Egyptian coin into his pocket and walked away with it. Before you know it, the mummy had disappeared from his case. He looked like any other mummy, except his eyes were scarier and that he kept on repeating just one word: coin. You see where this is going, right? Shaggy could not catch a break in this episode because somehow the mummy knew exactly where the coin was and kept on chasing him through the university campus. Also, the curse seemed to be real because they found that Dr. Najib had turned into a stone. But my heart sank when they found Scooby's petrified statue. Not Scooby! Thankfully, he was okay and suddenly showed up. But before everyone could understand that the statues were not real, Scooby and Shaggy shared a beautiful moment where they both hugged the statue and cried. And now things changed from, oh shit, maybe this curse is actually real to, okay, this is probably another Scooby-Doo mystery. And the latter turned out to be true because they discovered it was actually Dr. Najib who wanted the coin because it had the key to a secret compartment containing Anka's priceless diamond scarab. Ghost Clown. Yes, I am okay with seeing It movies and Pennywise wreaking havoc, but the 10-year-old me was absolutely not fine with seeing a ghost clown. He looked pretty much like a regular clown, you know, the pink nose and lips. But oh boy, there was nothing usual about what he did. The ghost clown, as he came to be known, carried a gold coin on a string, which he used to hypnotize people. Seeing a hypnotized Scooby balancing on a high wire and Shaggy trying to tame a lion freaked me out. At one point, the clown even had Scooby hanging in the air from a pair of balloons and said to him, "All that goes up must come down." I was absolutely not finding that funny. The ghost clown had no shortage of tricks. He could appear all over the circus, give the group a hard time, and then disappear whenever. When it finally seemed like they had him in a cage, the ghost clown seemingly vanished right in front of them. The ghost clown had this dangerous expression pasted on his face, and when he grinned, oh boy, I was pretty sure about getting nightmares about him. The worst part was that Mystery Inc. was not able to figure out what the hell was happening for a very long time. But once they realized that the gold coin was the reason for hypnotism, they used the same trick on the ghost clown to trap him. He was exposed as Harry the Hypnotist, who once worked at the circus but was imprisoned for stealing, and thus returned disguised as the ghost clown to get revenge on the circus. Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, Wolfman. Yes, believe it or not, Scooby and gang had to face all these classic monsters at once. I had no idea how Ken Spears, Joe Ruby, and Bill Lutz came up with this episode, but it was a goddamn roller coaster. At one moment you'd see Scooby and Shaggy trying to help Daphne, who was being chased by Frankenstein's monster, and the next, they were on the run from Wolfman. The storyboards for this episode must have been super fun. Anyway, so what happened was the gang was visiting the Franken Castle where they were hunted by these three monsters working together. A gaggle of galloping ghosts established the eeriness early on when a gypsy fortune teller told them that they would meet their doom that night, and it just escalated when Daphne got stuck on the other side of the drawbridge. The chase had started, and the Mystery Inc. already had a run-in with Dracula, with the iconic pointy ears, pale skin, and the black cape. Dracula pulled a whole lot of stunts to scare the group, and at one point he even managed to transform into a vampire bat. Oh, and the signature disappearance from the coffin was also there. He was more of a sneaky monster who warned the gang to not enter the castle and seemed to be very secretive. Now, the Wolfman was absolutely opposite. He was savage and exhibited brute strength and even chased Shaggy directly. This creature looked as though a wolf had found some tattered clothes and had put it on, but his eyes and fangs were actually frightening. Then came Frankenstein's monster. Looking like a humanoid male with black hair and pale skin, he used his towering stature to track the gang. However, it was lack of emotions and expressions that made him look even more horrible. And amidst all this, there was a hungry crocodile who tried to gobble up Shaggy and Scooby while they swung over the water body. When they somehow escaped the castle and returned to the gypsy woman, Scooby managed to notice a tapestry she was sitting on, and after pulling it, they learned the truth. The gypsy was actually a wanted man, Big Bob Oakley, and he put on all the 4 appearances to scare them away and search for treasure in the castle. But the werewolf seemed to follow the gang. Sure, it was a different person under the guise of a werewolf, but poor Shaggy had to once again run from this creature with blood-red eyes. I mean, talk about PTSD. Zombie and Witch. You're traveling with your friends at night and decide to take a shortcut. It's through a swamp, so some of you hesitate, but in the end it works out fine. But if you're in a horror movie, your car would break down and you're doomed. And if you are Shaggy, you'd spot a pale green-skinned man with an unusually oval head, pointy ears, and red eyes, and still ask him for directions. Yep, the Mystery Inc. had spotted a zombie, and Velma wanted to know more about him. Soon followed the witch, whose shadow was one spooky sight. She had the typical persona of an evil sorceress with blue skin and was chanting incantations about demons and dark in front of a fire. And it seemed to work because the zombie came out of the smoke and Velma got her wish. Despite being warned that the witch had supposedly used voodoo to bring the zombie to life, they began an investigation. Eventually, Shaggy and Scooby found voodoo dolls of the entire gang inside the witch's shack. But before they could run, the witch appeared and somehow made Daphne disappear in a puff of smoke. She also looked like she could fly through the air and kept appearing whenever the gang thought they had escaped. And the zombie? He was constantly lurking around, and soon the two teamed up and chased them through the boat while the group desperately tried to find Daphne. So for most of the episode, it did look like they had walked straight into a swamp, which was haunted by a witch and her undead servant. Fortunately, none of it was real, and they found out that the flying witch was actually a rubber balloon, while the disappearing act was created with smoke bomb. But what about the zombie? He was Zeke, a store owner who planned this whole thing with Zeb, his partner, and got him to play the witch. Turns out the two men had robbed an armored truck years ago and sunk it somewhere in the swamp, but had forgotten where they had hidden. So they dressed up as a witch and zombie and used the iron-tipped pole to locate the truck and scared everyone away while they searched for it. Redbeard's Ghost. I really thought that Mystery Inc. was done with ghostly sailors after the incident with Captain Cutler, but nope. This time around they got themselves involved with a pirate ghost, Redbeard. And I guess Redbeard was introduced in one of the coolest ways possible. A freighter captain looked through his binoculars and spotted a pirate ship approaching. Standing on its deck was the ghost of Redbeard himself, laughing menacingly as he prepared to hijack another freighter. Redbeard's ghost had this orange beard and wore a black pirate hat with a skull and crossbones. But the thing that I remember distinctly was his bright red coat and pink bandana. When the Mystery Inc. found out about this ghost, they learned his backstory too. Redbeard was a real terror about 300 years ago, but since he was brought to justice by the ancestors of Cial Magnus, he was haunting and hijacking the Magnus' ships to ruin his business. And the gang thought, okay, let's check it out and try to lure Redbeard in, but instead got captured by him. He locked some of them away and even forced Shaggy and Scooby to cook for him. But after Scooby and Shaggy fell overboard and followed the ghost ship into a hidden cave, they were shocked to find stolen cargo. And after a whole lot of ordeal and Scooby and Shaggy blowing bubbles from their mouths and being attacked by flying swords, they managed to expose the apparent ghost. He was none other than Cial Magnus himself, and he was raiding his own ships because he was about to lose his business. Snow Ghost. Trust me, with every Scooby Doo episode, I was striking out places to visit. First it was the sea, then amusement parks, and now a snowy mountain. Because this time the Mystery Inc. had a run-in with a large snow ghost. This creature had long white fur, sharp claws, and huge footprints. But the creepiest part was those yellow eyes and the eyebrow. They curled upwards at the ends, almost like horns, dude. And this monster was genuinely aggressive. He chased the gang through the snowy mountains and even grabbed Scooby, trying to throw him off a cliff. Wait, it gets worse. The Snow Ghost also attempted to saw Velma in half and threw dynamite at Velma, Shaggy, and Scooby. I swear, this was the most monstrous monster I had seen in Scooby Doo. Then came the lore about him, which made me believe that the Mystery Inc. was in serious trouble. Apparently, there was a Yeti who once lived in Tibet and attacked Fu Lan Chi before falling to its death. But then, the creature returned as a ghost to continue his mission. This ghost was also known for turning others into ghosts, but in reality, it was just powder. And the Snow Ghost was their lodge owner, Mr. Greenway, who dressed up as the creature and kept people away from the abandoned sawmill, where he and Mr. Leech were running a smuggling operation. Oh, about the Snow Ghost flying? He was wearing transparent skis that were difficult to see in the darkness, but damn, he did look scary AF. Spooky Space Kook. Okay, now we have aliens in Scooby-Doo. And I remember the spooky space kook being one of those monsters that looked deeply unsettling because he looked like an actual creature from outer space. For some reason, he was walking around on Earth in a blue spacesuit and had a skull visible through his helmet. To make things even more futuristic, there was a blinding red glow inside the helmet whenever he laughed. That laugh, dude, it could have given Janice a run for her money. Mystery Inc. first spotted this creature on an abandoned airfield, where Spooky Space Kook was probably out on a walk, leaving trails of glowing footprints and fingerprints. Yeah, his entire body kept on emitting a blue glow for some weird reason. Now, unlike other monsters or supposed ghosts they have faced, the gang was confused about what to do because this thing was not simply pulling a Michael Myers hide-and-seek. It was leaving behind physical evidence while chasing them around and laughing in that high-pitched voice. He went after Scooby and Shaggy, and soon enough he brought an entire army of what looked like other space ghosts. And among all these otherworldly creatures, a Jeep came to life and started driving by itself. Yeah, it was total chaos, but the worst thing he could have done was steal Scooby's snacks and then laugh at him. Jerk. But finally, the group found a projector and tape recorder and realized that they were not really dealing with an alien, and the mysterious spacecraft was just a projection, while the laughter was a sped-up recording. And the army of ghosts? Stuffed animals. Honestly, even after all these discoveries were made, I took time to heal from this scene. Also, the reveal was pretty grand. Spooky Space Kook accidentally ran into the wind tunnel, and when Fred switched it on, the blast blew the costume off him and revealed Henry Bascombe, a farmer's neighbor. Bascombe had discovered that the Air Force decided to reopen the deserted airfield, but he wanted to keep others away, planning to buy the surrounding land at a cheap price. Ghost of Zen Tuo. You know, there is something creepy about old traditional masks. Probably it's the stories we hear at bonfires about cursed artifacts, Or maybe there have been enough slashers with the villain and their iconic masks. But if there's anything I learned, it's that you should never casually bring one home. But it seems like Daphne did not get the memo, so she ended up buying this golden Chinese mask covered in jewels. And it took almost no time for two hooded, zombie-like figures to come looking for it. And they did not give the gang any time to understand what was happening before chasing them through the streets of Chinatown. But things escalated when Daphne got abducted, with a kidnapper leaving a mysterious message which directed Mystery Inc. to a temple in the hills. Yep, that temple was not good news, and an ancient-looking figure dressed in a white robe, hood, and green hat appeared. It was the ghost of Zen Tuo, and he wore a really weird mask, but somehow what was underneath was worse. It was pitch dark with glowing golden eyes. The ghost of Zen Tuo was followed around by two zombie-like minions, and no way was I convinced that this was another fake creature. The ghost was not happy with them coming to the temple and got the group trapped in different places. There was this one scene where they found a room full of pigeons carrying messages with dates and times attached to their legs. Yeah, the pigeons were cute, but those encrypted messages, they were creepy, dude. And Zen Tuo was pretty short-tempered. He literally broke a stick Shaggy was using to try and distract him in half. But when they finally uncovered the truth, we learned that the terrifying Zen Tuo was Mr. Fong, the same art dealer who had warned the gang about the supposedly cursed mask in the first place. He was actually running an international smuggling operation from the temple, and the masks were being used to carry information into the country, while pigeons delivered the messages to his accomplices. Creeper. It finally seemed like Mystery Inc. was about to have some fun and were getting ready for a dance, but a green-faced monster popped up and ruined their evening. How I wished that sometimes the only problems the group had to deal with were awkward dancing or bad music. He was a hunchbacked figure with dark red hair and a lopsided face, but the jaw was what sold the monster to me. He looked like a comic book mystery that had come to life. It was called the Creeper, and apparently he had been robbing banks and terrorizing the town, but no one could do anything because he seemed supernatural. Like, the Creeper could walk straight through walls and had superhuman strength. The Creeper could literally fell a solid tree trunk and push it onto the road without losing a sweat. And the Creeper did not hesitate to do anything and everything possible to put Mystery Inc. in trouble. He'd even jumped on a horse and continued chasing the gang. But even after being this dangerous, the Creeper was apparently not smart enough to see through Scooby's obvious hen disguise. Yep, that was a classic moment. Eventually, the gang pieced together the mystery and turned out it was none other than Mr. Carswell, the president of the very bank that was robbed, and he put on the whole Creeper act to convince everyone that some supernatural creature was behind the robberies. Ghost of Mr. Hyde. Picking up hitchhikers in stories like these never ends well, but unknowingly giving a ride to a green-skinned jewel thief who robbed a high-rise building? Holy crap. The ghost of Hyde sneaked into the back of the mystery machine after stealing a rare jeweled necklace and casually lay in the back of their van, covered in a beach blanket. Scooby found him and tried to explain that there was a monster with them, literally making faces, but Velma thought he was having a brain freeze. But when the gang actually turns around and sees this thing for themselves, the huge white beady eyes and skeletal-looking face, they immediately decide that Scooby might have had a point. The ghost of Hyde too could walk through solid surfaces, giving him a supernatural appearance. Eventually, they end up in an old mansion, where inside they find Dr. Jekyll. Yeah, you saw that coming, right? Now, Jekyll told them that he was experimenting with a vitamin formula which went awry, and every time he woke up he would find weird stuff like blood on his shoes, and conveniently enough, even stolen jewelry. And the gang is super confused whether Jekyll was actually transforming into this green monster without knowing it, or there was something fishy. Velma realized that something wasn't adding up, and in the meanwhile, Hyde too came out and started running after Scooby and Shaggy. He even grabbed Shaggy and took him to the laboratory, threatening to turn him into a frog. The gang then devised a really intriguing plan. They decided to give Hyde a taste of his own medicine. So Fred, Daphne, and Velma all dress up as Hyde and start appearing one after another, freaking the so-called monster out. No brownie points for guessing that it was Dr. Jekyll under the mask who turned to stealing after his experiments failed. But wait, he was climbing on the sides of a building. Yeah, that was just suction cups hidden in his costume.
I think... Oh no!
Wax Phantom. Yup, another phantom, but this one was significantly scarier than the other two, because this entity was made out of wax. I mean, just think about it, a 9-foot blob of wax chasing you through a museum, trying to turn you into one of the exhibits. The wax phantom was one of those monsters in Scooby Doo who barely needed much makeup to look scary. He was basically this shapeless humanoid who looked like he had been melted and brought back to life, and he popped up before Scooby and gang out of nowhere. So they were at Johnny Sand's dance game show when suddenly the lights went out and a massive glowing figure appeared. However, when the lights came back on, the wax phantom was gone, and so were the valuables in the safe. The Mystery Inc. followed him into a wax museum, and the creature tried to put Scooby and Shaggy into a vat of molten wax. This one was one of the darker storylines in Scooby Doo, Where Are You? Ironically, they managed to trap the phantom under a shower of wax, and underneath all that cyan goo, there was a man, Mr. Stevens, the missing station manager himself. Mr. Stevens had actually been embezzling money from the TV station and planned to flee to South America while framing the creepy wax sculptor Grisby for everything. But the image of Shaggy and Scooby slowly moving toward a vat of boiling wax, that shit stayed with me. Headless Spectre. You remember the legend of Sleepy Hollow, right? The Headless Horseman riding around scaring the shit out of Ichabod Crane? Well, Scooby Doo had its own version of that horror story, but this time the Headless guy was not riding around on a horse. He was simply wandering around a creepy old mansion, laughing eerily and chasing people. In hindsight, Scooby had it worse. The group was out to go to a rock festival when they got lost and ran into a farmer, Asa Shanks, who gave them a disclaimer about the shortcut. There was an ancient mansion which was allegedly haunted by a headless specter. Of course, Shaggy was the first to protest, who thought disappearing would be better than encountering the headless specter. Unfortunately, the mystery machine was running low on gas, so they had to take the goddamn shortcut, and the van had to overheat right outside the mansion. Scooby and Shaggy went looking for water near an old well when a white ghost suddenly floated right out of it, and the duo stuttered for quite a time before spelling out ghosts. And then there was a candle floating around on its own, which was followed by a disappearing head on a painting. And somehow it was always Shaggy and Scooby who witnessed these things, but no one believed them until they found a box with Jefferson Stillwell's freaking head sitting inside it. Okay, fine, it was a wooden dummy, but still, when the actual headless specter did appear, he looked exactly like the man in the painting, aka Jefferson Stillwell, who was dressed in a 19th century outfit. Sounds good, except he really did not have a head. And then followed the cat and mouse chase. Over time, they found an old diary belonging to Jefferson Stillwell, which contained clues about a hidden treasure. After being chased through the greenhouse and ending up floating around on helium balloons, they finally managed to catch the headless specter, who was none other a descendant of Jefferson. But wait, he was not alone and definitely not responsible for the strange noises coming from the attic. So, well, it was Asa Shanks, who too was looking for the fortune.
We're goners!
Caveman. Okay, so what would you do if you went fishing one day and accidentally pulled a 2-million-year-old frozen caveman out of the ocean? Because that's exactly how Mystery Inc. ended up meeting with one of the weirdest monsters in the entire series. Shaggy was just fishing with the gang when he somehow managed to pull a gigantic block of ice, inside which there was a perfectly preserved caveman. Velma, being Velma, immediately recognized him as a prehistoric Neanderthal from the Arctic region, so they decided to take the whole damn thing to ocean land and leave it with two scientists, Professors Wayne and Engstrom. But this is where things took a turn, and when the gang returned later to pick Shaggy's fishing stuff, they found that the whole place was trashed, and neither Professor Wayne nor the caveman was anywhere to be found. Wait, is that Caveman or Captain America? How the hell did it come back to life? Mystery Inc. found massive footprints, and by following them, they reached the docks where finally the man was properly visible. He had brownish skin, huge teeth, and these heavy brow ridges, and he wasn't exactly interested in making friends. That means the gang was unwelcomed, and the moment he spotted them, the chase began. Finally, Mystery Inc. managed to trap the caveman, but it started yelling for help after his back got caught in a clam. And that's when Shaggy realized that the caveman could talk. When they pulled him out of the clam, it was Professor Wayne. Turns out there was never a resurrected caveman. It was Wayne who had created a fake frozen caveman and sent them drifting toward ocean land. He then melted them before disguising himself as the creature because he wanted to make everyone believe that the prehistoric man had come back to life while he could rid of Professor Engstrom and steal his $1 million worth invention. Alright guys, that's all we have for today. I am still in awe of how creative the writers and designers were when it came to making the monsters in Scooby Doo Where Are You? Every apparent creature had an amazing narrative, and the gags in such weird situations, it's actually hard to pull off, but somehow it was perfect. I hope later generations too get a chance to discover this classic, and by the way, I am still spooked by masks. Do let us know your favorite Scooby Doo moment in the comments below, and don't forget to ring the bell icon. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.